Caitlin Clark made her much anticipated debut. She actually made it in New England, Connecticut Sun game at Uncasville at Mohegan Sun. We actually had boots on the ground for NESN.com.
Did
it was so I guess we're kind of just going to talk about the impact that she could have on this sport and where it's going. We'll sprinkle in some betting stuff because it is kind of comical to look at the odds with anything tied to her. People are betting the living hell out of Caitlin Clark related odds and props, and there's not a ton of value to be had on much of anything. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But so she played okay. I think that's kind of a secondary thing. I do find it kind of interesting that this was not a bigger deal, unless I'm misreading the situation. Like a Tuesday night in May, I guess that's just kind of the ebb and the flow of the WNBA season.
I think
we're kind of coming at this as complete novices when it comes to WNBA. I don't know about you. I don't know.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I mean, I think for all that is going on right now, obviously the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs,
that's one
NFL
thing.
Schedule release. There's a lot sort of going on right now in the sports calendar, and I think all things considered, it was about as big as it could have been.
I guess the more
if it was a standalone thing in the middle of the summer, it would have been a little bit bigger. But I feel like it got a pretty fair amount of publicity.
This might be turning into a bit of a non sequitur, but it's just the idea that this WNBA new era begins in the middle of the NBA playoffs probably isn't the most productive.
Yeah, but
I also am not going to sit here and pretend to know anything about scheduling and things like that, and the what's the word? The mechanics of it all, sure. The intricacies of building schedules, which we will get to a little bit more in a bit. I was looking. There's a great story, on ESPN this morning about kind of just looking at the Caitlin Clark impact on the WNBA and where the WNBA is going. Some wild stuff in here. Interviews with representatives from 10 of the league's 12 teams describe skyrocketing ticket demand across WNBA and growing revenues. I think, what was it, the jerseys thing? WNBA jersey sales are up 750%.
That's insane.
Year over year. Caitlin Clark driving much of that growth. Sales of her Indiana Fever jersey would put her fourth on a list of the top-selling NBA jerseys this year, or since January 1st. What's your take on this whole Caitlin Clark ordeal or extravaganza? What does this mean for the WNBA, women's sports in general, and are you kind of buying what they're selling when it comes to this being a massive landmark movement in women's sports?
I mean, what you just said, that's only a small portion of it. Numbers are the numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that we're entering sort of a boom period, if whatever you want to refer to it as. Which, so for me with and I mentioned this to you earlier when we were talking about it. Ultimately, I don't know how good she's gonna be. Maybe she is. Maybe we look back in 10, 15 years and we're wow, she was the greatest WNBA player of all time. I don't know, because I do look at it, and even seeing some of the game last night, there's a potential for her to reach this next level, and then sort of I still think she'll be one of the 3 to 5 best players in the league, but there's obviously so much more. The talent is much more condensed. It's down to 12 teams now, and you get the best talent on the planet. So is she the GOAT? Who the hell knows? But I think it's pretty clear that her impact is far beyond anything that relates to on the court.
Yeah, well, from an on the court thing, it kind of struck me in the a little bit I watched the other night with you do kind of forget when she was at Iowa, playing a Big Ten schedule. Like I said to you earlier, what is the 4th best player on Ohio State going to end up doing in the long run when it comes to basketball? Probably nothing. And now it's she's going up against grown women, adults. And I think it's going to take her some time. But that's the case for everybody. You talk about the NBA equivalent, Wembanyama. He ended up having a fantastic rookie season. I think he's going to run away with Rookie of the Year if he hasn't already. Has that already been announced? I don't even know.
Yeah.
But I do remember earlier in the season, there was a kind of a feeling out process, and I think she's going to go through that too. But I also agree with your bigger point where I don't think it matters. I really don't. She would have to be an epic flame out for it to stall this momentum.
Right.
And I think one of the more disheartening but also kind of understanding things about what you've seen from the rest of the WNBA is there's been some pushback on hey, we built this, like, and yeah, they did, and yeah, they got it to where it is, and this, I think the WNBA was on an ascent already, but like, I kind of look at like the Diana Taurasi stuff when during the tournament when they were doing like those live casts, and she's like, well, we'll just wait till she gets to the WNBA, and then she's gonna get stuffed in a locker, and maybe that does happen, but like, if I'm everybody else in the league, and maybe I'm kind of painting with a very, very broad brush, give me all the Caitlin Clark. Like, it has nothing to do necessarily with her specifically as a person or a player. It's like rising tides lift all boats, and we're seeing that already. This thing is only going to continue to get bigger to the point where like the league has to figure some of its crap out too, where it's like we're just talking about like charters and things like that, and how like they can't afford to drop the ball and miss this opportunity to make a buttload of money. Yeah. And that's what's going to ultimately make this league even better in the long run, or get it to the next level, is making money and reinvesting it in a game back in the game in a way that makes sense. So I think there's going to be people who are at least on the court going to go after her and try to make an example of her and say, not so fast. But I do hope for like the overall health and well-being of the sport and women's sports in general, there is a little bit of an embrace among her peers, because I do think we're just seeing, again, these numbers are insane. Like, it's is this the spark, or was the spark already there and she's the gasoline on the fire? Whatever fire-related cliche you want to use.
Yeah.
This has a potential to get them to the next place where they want to be or where they need to be.
Yeah, I think it was forecasted back in March that women's elite sports could generate a revenue surpassing $1 billion for the first time ever this year.
That's insane.
Which is a 300% increase over the industry's evaluation in 2021. So, like, it's happening, and it's happening fast.
Yeah.
And, like, to go back to what I said about, like, her on-court prowess or whatever, like, I don't want to downplay her skills, because there is a chance that she is, revolutionizes the game in a way like Steph Curry did.
Yeah,
where she's hitting shots from the logo, and it's
the obvious comp, right?
Yeah, and it turns out to be as jaw-dropping as it was in college. But to your point, like, it doesn't need to be that.
No,
like she could be the face of this sort of revolution. If only for a short time. Like, this is why I think ultimately,
she could be a comet. Like,
yeah, like
no pun intended.
The reason that she might get knocked down the pecking order is because of the influence she has on these other athletes that come up in, let's say, 5 years,
right? That
are stronger, faster,
yep.
Just generally more all in on their professional sports dreams, I guess, because of what they're seeing with her. Basically, her walking now is so that little Tiffany and Topeka can run in a few years. You know what I mean? Like, that's literally like what's happening. So like that's the impact for me. It's like has like less to do about her stats or whatever you want to call it, and more about what this leads to 5 years, 10 years down the road.
I hope little Tiffany is not in Topeka or in the Midwest is not daughter to Harrison Butker, because he might have some differing opinions on that.
To go back to the betting thing real quick.
Yeah,
though,
I was just pulling up some stuff too as well.
Because it is kind of fascinating that, I mean, this is one. I think that's the other aspect of this. You're going to see a huge boom, and you already are kind of seeing it in terms of just like volume of tickets or the handle placed on WNBA wagers. That feels like it's only going to go up, but finding the value seems like it's going to be difficult, right? Like,
yeah, because I mean, it's like the most basic betting stuff where when somebody bets or multiple people bet on one thing over and over and over, the price has to change.
Right.
And if you're coming in late, you're not getting the best number. Like, to that point, I saw a friend of the program, I guess I can call him, Ben Fox on Twitter, said Caitlin Clark to go over 20.5 points in her WNBA debut was the most bet player prop among WNBA and NBA markets on Tuesday. So,
was it over 20.5?
Yeah, so she had 20.
See, the bad beats, there's no limitations on where the bad beats are.
Hopefully somebody got that at 19.5.
That's why you always going to shop around for the best number.
The WNBA opener between the Sun and the Fever garnered more bets than any game of the 2023 season, including 6 times the amounts of bets placed on the Game 4 of the WNBA Finals at Caesars. It's just insane numbers. So FanDuel offered Caitlin Clark markets to lead the Fever in scoring this season, minus 380. This was before the opener, so that number, if the market's even there, that number is going to continue to change and lose value. Let's see. To average 22 per game, must play 28 games, minus 160. To record 130 made threes is minus 125. There's not a whole lot of pluses on this page. You look at like the rookie of the year market. She is minus 700. Which
is wild.
She's coming in, and this is another point I kind of wanted to get to, and I think that this could actually be a test case for the NBA and even the NFL or college football and men's college basketball. She is a minus 700 favorite in a class that includes Cameron Brink, Angel Reese. Like, this is at a time where you've got a lot of good young talent coming in the league. There's even more coming, and like, I think you kind of look at what has happened with women's college basketball. I think that's a big reason for this too, right? Is the explosion of women's college basketball based on these players who are at schools or at least in college basketball for multiple years. That builds the interest, that builds like the notoriety. You know who this person is. I mean, Caitlin Clark has been a superstar, like a legitimate superstar at the top of that game for 2 years. Angel Reese, same bucket. Like, I don't think that type of thing eventually hurts the NBA. It certainly doesn't hurt the NFL. But it does, at least the nostalgic part of me, wish I could go back and or we could have college basketball and college football on the men's level go back to what it used to be before the portal and the NIL, because it makes a difference. Like, people know who Caitlin Clark is.